Hi, I'm Matthew Sadler.
I'm WIM Natasha Regan. In this video we will be looking at a medley of games in the English opening. Our main game is from Top-of-the-Top and it's Leela Zero against Stoofvlees. And some of Stoofvlees' ideas in this game remind us a bit of Stockfish against AlphaZero, and we've done some previous videos on those games in the English. Here we're going to look at some lines where black plays 3 bishop c5, and we get some very sharp and topical lines. And we're also going to be looking at lines, as in the main game, where black plays 3 c6 in this position. And we follow for quite some time a line that Caruana has played recently, and Caruana played bishop e7. Here Stoofvlees has a very interesting idea where he plays bishop e6 first, and this is a pawn sacrifice, enabling black to castle quickly. It looks like the game is equal, but actually Stoofvlees plays very riskily, and actually Leela Zero is able to conjure up a quick attack, and there's nothing really that black can do, so in the end white wins the main game.
Yeah, let's have a look at all these games. Again, it was this top-of-the-top bonus competition where the engines were given a very short opening book, often just the first move, and then they had to choose what they wanted to play. And well, that just led to them playing, stuff that's very topical in theory, and well, then it's great to see, the ideas of all these different engines with different styles, just working their way through, all our opening theory. So how did this come up? I'm sure you can guess that without too much difficulty, but let's have a look. It's c4, e5, g3, knight f6,
The book here
bishop
was
g2.
simply 1c4, yeah?
Simply 1c4, that's right. Yeah, and now there are several main moves in actual fact, but two moves that the engines were trying. And the first one was bishop c5, which we also saw in some thrilling AlphaZero-Stockfish games. Stockfish in particular found some amazing ideas with white, and well, AlphaZero found some new ideas with black. So how does this continue? Well, knight c3, c6, and now white really goes for it and tries to cross black's plan by attacking the pawn on e5. Always quite a disruptive idea, this, with the knight attacking the pawn on e5 when black's played c6, because obviously the natural knight c6 to defend e5 is no longer possible. But if black's played c6, well, as we're going to see many times throughout this video, black can also play quite aggressively and can play this move e4. Knight h4 and d5. And well, at the human level, this became very topical when the Spanish Grandmaster David Anton beat Grishuk in this line. And Fabiano Caruana also played a game against Jordan van Foreest in the Wijk-aan-Zee tournament. Well, they're very sharp lines, as you can see. Well, black's definitely gone for a big pawn center, and g5 is actually a big threat, trapping the knight on h4. So c takes d5, c takes d5, d3, knight g4. This is the key point for black, attacking the pawn on f2, and also opening up the support of the queen for the g pawn. So g5 is going to happen now, and this knight on h4 is going to be trapped. Castles g5 like this.
Looks like black's having it all their own way.
Indeed, indeed. So I think Caruana played d takes e4, takes, and bishop f4 against Van Foreest. But this didn't turn out amazingly for white. It was nothing special. The main line is to play d4, and now in the Anton Grishuk game, Black played Bishop E7, which I think has been was played in another game as well. It's the human reaction. But AlphaZero actually, when it was Black, played a new move, which was Bishop B4, and very, very interesting. Just really trying to not only pick up the knight on H4, but also to prevent White from getting any sort of pressure on the centre. Now,
we did a video on this line a little while back.
We certainly did, and in this position actually, Stockfish played the amazing knight F3, takes, just sacrificing a piece for a pawn, but really aiming at these at this centre. And of course, this knight on G4 is loose. White's threatening E2 to E4, and the pawn on G5 is loose as well. So Bishop G5 could be a threat. It was a very sharp game, very interesting, but ended up in a draw by perpetual check in the end. I'll put the link up in the comments, so you can have a look at that one as well. But it's really, really funny. I do find it funny to see Stockfish and AlphaZero 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, fighting out all these lines. And when I saw them at the time, I thought, wow, that's really interesting, but it's not exactly mainline theory. But then 2.5 years later, yeah, suddenly I think I guess because people have got access to Leela and they can pit it against Stockfish, then you're getting a very similar effect to to these AlphaZero-Stockfish games. Really quite funny. What AlphaZero did in it.
Tried Bishop B4 in human chess?
No, not yet. So the engines are really
still awaiting further tests.
Yeah, human tests. They're still the engines are fighting this one out for us at the moment. So, but AlphaZero, when it had White in this position, played the move H3. G takes H4, HG takes Queen B3, hitting that bishop on B4, and then Black plays Bishop takes C3. And B takes C3, Knight C6. And this was also a game AlphaZero against Stockfish. So actually also Stockfish played this novelty Bishop B4 once, although I think it played Bishop E7 more often. And then here AlphaZero played the very natural F takes G3. And we got this funny position, castles, amazing. Bishop H6, Rook E8, Rook F4, Knight A5 and Knight C4. It's a somewhat deceptive position actually. It looks like like White's should be clearly better, you would have thought, with that open Black king. But White finds it very hard to really get pieces properly involved against the Black king side. Because the pawns on G4 and G3 are there. You'd rather not have them at all, to be honest. Hard to get the queen involved, and this bishop on G2 is blocked by this very rigid Black centre on D5 and E4. And of course, having the knight on C4 prevents White from playing C3 to C4. I think the game, have I got a few more moves? Queen D6, A5, Bishop E6, Queen E1, B5. Actually, AlphaZero tried to make something on the king side and Stockfish advanced on the queen side. It was a very sharp game, but ended up in a draw. But Black was definitely not worse here. So what did Leela do? Leela did something slightly different. It played this slightly mysterious move, Rook B1. I suppose the basic idea will be to try and pin down this pawn on B7 even when the queen moves away. But I'm not 100% sure about the the total concept behind it. However, the big idea was that after Black played takes and Bishop E6, obviously, Black's not really worried about this pawn on B7. Black's just going to play Rook C8 and then try and get the knight onto C4. White's idea was to open up the centre with C3 to C4. And it led to a very sharp game, but both engines were pretty sure that it was going to be equal all the way. Queen B7, Rook C8, G5, just to stop Black from getting big counterplay with Rook takes G4. D takes C4. Looks very, very risky for White to do this, but for Black to do this rather. But somehow Black seems to hold the whole position together. And now Bishop E4 was played, and now Rook C7. Bishop takes C4 would have allowed Queen takes F7 mate. But now it looks as if maybe black's winning a piece because of the queen's got to move away, and then bishop takes e4. But in actual fact, what happens here is bishop d5, rook g5, takes, check, check. And we ended up with a draw by perpetual. Rook there, and check.
Including a queen sacrifice.
Check. A queen sacrifice indeed. So, yeah, I mean, basically, Leela tried a new idea, but it didn't really shake the evaluation of the line, which was that it's pretty fine for black actually. So yeah, would be quite interesting to see this played at in human games. But remember, if you see Caruana playing it or anyone else, you saw it first in engine chess.
Well, what I'm thinking, it gives you the chance of being the first person to play it.
Exactly.
And get a novelty.
Exactly.
A very powerful novelty at that.
Indeed. So, our main game continued with probably AlphaZero's favourite move, which was 3c6. Again, we had some games with between the two engines. When AlphaZero was white in this position, it preferred to play the move d4 and takes queen takes, which is one of the main ideas. And after d5, knight f3, bishop e7. It played quite quietly with castles, and we saw a great game where AlphaZero won quite a beautiful ending in this line. Just played knight takes c4, knight d6 takes c8, and got the two bishops and ground away beautifully. I'll put the links again in the comments. Stockfish's favourite idea here was to play knight f3. Again, this very typical idea, just attacking the pawn on e5 when it can't be defended by knight c6. In fact, AlphaZero also liked this quite a bit. There was one, we've also got a video where we showed AlphaZero playing knight f3 on move 2, which is very, very unusual. We called it the quirky Alekins because, it's a bit like an Alekin, and you've got this extra, useful move c4. But in this position, knight f3, and here, AlphaZero really went for it here, and the NNs do too as well. So e4, queen b6, going all out just to disrupt that knight on that Alekin style knight. Knight b3, and now a5.
Still trying to disrupt.
That knight will have no rest whatsoever. So d3 and a4, bang. Knight d2. I do remember analysing this position with black, and I was a little bit uncertain quite what I'd achieved by chasing the knight away like that. It is actually quite dangerous. Black's actually got a couple of good ideas, and Caruana's played all of them actually. Bishop c5 is one idea, hitting the pawn on f2, and this was actually the choice of Stockfish NNUE, so the neural net Stockfish, neural net evaluation plus Stockfish search. And it played against a game against Leela Zero that followed a major game, Wesley So against Caruana. Very aggressive from black, threatening knight f2 check. White covers with knight e4, castles, knight c3. Bishop takes, queen takes. If rook takes, then knight e3 would be very unpleasant. So queen c1, d5. If you go knight e3, then c5 would happen, which would be rather annoying. So black plays d5, and now black plays knight e3. And there was this game with Leela Zero. I mean, Wesley So played rook f3 against Caruana, and Caruana played the slightly odd takes and queen d8. And got away with it, but it did look quite risky for black somehow. In my engine games, black just wanted to play knight takes d5, and they thought that black was completely fine in this position. That looks quite interesting. D takes c6 was played by Leela, with the point that if you take on f1, then I think knight d5 is rather awkward in this position. So black played knight takes c6, rook f4, knight takes g2, knight e5. And well, this was Leela against Stockfish NNUE, and well, as the game proceeded, you just sort of saw that White's pieces were rather awkward. That king on g2, or queen on g1, obviously, the knight on e4, pinned by the bishop on b7. Leela kept the balance. This may be a tiny bit better, but Stockfish NNUE had just no problems, drawing this. So that actually does look quite a decent line for black as well. But back to our heroes. Black also has another idea, which is just to play d5, and White goes c takes d5, and then e takes d3. That's the idea. And White plays castles, obviously hoping for d takes, queen takes, which is quite upsetting for black. However, black just takes back on d5, and White takes back on d3. So yeah, again, I looked at this position with black, and I was thinking, wow, I'm not sure. I've got these pawns on a4 and d5. They're sort of targets for a knight on c3. Could well be that White's just pleasantly better, but in actual fact, it didn't really seem to look that way. Certainly not the way that the engines defend. They find all sorts of ways of playing this well. AlphaZero was playing bishop e7 in this position, knight c3 and queen a5. Important move to defend the pawn on d5 and the pawn on a4. And after rook e1, it was playing bishop e6. And it drew quite a few games, an appreciable number of games against Stockfish with very little difficulty. This was what Stockfish was doing. b4, knight e2, clever little idea there, and knight b3, and bishop b2. And you might feel that that White's just a little bit better here because, well, you can get the knight onto d4, and then this bishop e6, bishop e7 are a little bit awkward. And of course, having a square like that in front of a pawn, it's a nice outpost. But AlphaZero played very directly and very well, I think. It took the knight on e2, so well, White's going to have difficulty moving that knight on b3 now because it can't get to d4, and then played this very sharp idea, rook a6. Just looking for rook b6, attacking the knight on b3. And after rook there, then Stockfish felt compelled to give up the dark squared bishop, and then play knight c5. And we got this sort of position. And well, I think within about 5 or 6 moves, we were in an opposite coloured bishop ending, which was just a complete draw. So, that's quite interesting from from AlphaZero. I mean, I think the only thing that you would say about it is that, black didn't really have many chances at all to, to play for a win or anything. It was really just White, always being just a little bit better. So Stoofvlees came up, as always, put a bit of spice into the whole mix. And knight c3, queen a5, rook e1, bishop e6 was Stoofvlees' idea. And against AllieStein, it really carried on this concept with a great little idea. It played the move bishop e7, which is just a pawn sack. And after takes, then castles kingside. And well, the nice thing about it is, it's in some ways black spending a lot of time always just worrying about defending this bishop on e6. Here you just give it away and you get counterplay on the f file. And White's pieces are quite awkward. It's especially with the light squared bishop gone. If you put a knight on f3, that's not really a very solid presence. And well, we saw this in the game. In actual fact, after knight f3, black played d4. My engine games, black was also found the interesting idea a3, knight e2, queen b4, threatening a takes b2. And after b takes a3, queen g4, hitting the rook on e6 and the knight on f3. Really very interesting idea, and to be honest, well, it doesn't seem to be winning, but the tactics that White had to find to stay alive were quite well. They were quite intricate. Rook e3, knight d7, hitting the knight on f3, king g2, d4. Now, that rook on e3 is protecting the knight on f3. Where's it going to move? Well, White plays h3, queen f5, keeping a track still. Where's that rook going to move? Queen b3 check, king h8, and now this idea of white is to go g4 and bishop b2 and pin the pawn to the queen, so you can't play d takes c3.
It's working, but it all seems to be hanging by a thread.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's really I wouldn't feel confident at all of calculating this in a real game, or I'd be very, very nervous about it. So it looks like Black's got loads of ideas here. Stoofvlees played something quite funny, really, quite amazing actually. It went d4, knight e4, and then went knight e8, which I have to say, when I saw it played, I didn't understand remotely what Stoofvlees was getting at. That happens from time to time. Stoofvlees is quite amazing. We call it the Morozevich of the engine world, but it's actually a very nice idea. So, I mean, queen f5 is one threat, hitting e6 and f3, and Black's actually got the idea of playing knight c7 when, bizarrely enough, the rook on e6 is rather short of squares. So Allie bailed out basically with bishop g5, takes, h6, chasing the knight back, knight h3. So with queen f5, you could play knight f4. That's the idea, I think. Just hanging together. But here Stoofvlees played the move knight c7. And it turns out that this rook on e6 is caught in a very nice sort of, knight stranglehold, you could say, because after here, the game was actually drawn by repetition. But if you've gone to g6, then I would play knight e5, rook d6, knight e8, rook there, knight c7, rook e7, knight g6, rook d7, knight e5. You can't get away. You can't get away. It's really, really amazing. I've never seen quite an extreme case of that, I have to say. That's really quite amazing. So that was a very nice game from Stoofvlees. Very nice pawn sacrifice, and
that game was drawn.
That game was drawn, and that definitely I definitely would enjoy playing that one against Leela. Stoofvlees played knight d8, which looks quite clumsy, but actually it's just well judged, because Black's going to play bishop e7, and then the pin is broken and Black's threatening to take on h3. And if you play bishop e6, knight I mean, it's a very good square. So actually this is also from Stoofvlees a very good, clear way to a good position, to equality. So, but the engines, they don't agree a draw. They keep on going, and well, Leela tried to make something of what it felt was a tiny advantage. These are all very simple, normal moves. I think both sides just making their position to look a little bit more logical. White's looking at this square on d4 for future use, and stopping anything coming to g4, and also protecting all these light squares with the king. Black has played rook e8 and bishop f8, and his king's looking quite safe. Yeah, I mean, I might have played some move like g6, I don't know, in this position, just put the bishop on g7, but Stoofvlees played b5, which is very logical as well, going to play b4 and then try and target this pawn on b2. Leela plays quite a nice little idea here, bishop d4, takes, rook takes, and takes. So giving up the dark squared bishop, but getting a little bit of purchase on the light squares, by getting rid of a knight, that could potentially defend light squares. And also, of course, Black's played b5, so, well, this square's a little bit more sensitive. Queen b6, some little tactics there. If knight b5, then d4 wins the knight. So knight e2, bishop c5, knight f5. Some tactics from Leela here. Bishop c5 will go d4, and well, Black's got a few tricks. What can Black do? Black could go queen e6 and knight f6, because after king f2 you've got knight e4 check. So White plays rook f1 and rook f2 and has two knights against a rook and pawn. Never, very clear. I mean, sometimes the rook is better in those positions. Here, there's a lot of weaknesses to attack, so I think White's probably a little bit better. But it's not absolutely huge, even if you fall into that trap. But Stoofvlees played b4, very logical. Took with a bishop, rook c2 and bishop f8. So I mean, not much has changed really, you could say. Black's created a weak pawn on b2 to target, and White's, well, vaguely put a knight on f5. Actually, White manages to generate quite a bit of play. It's quite surprising. Queen c1, taking control of the c-file. Yeah, and it starts getting a bit risky now from Stoofvlees, and in the end this is going to lead to disaster, as we shall see. So queen d2, knight d6.
Stage is pretty equal, you'd say.
It's still pretty even, that's right, yeah. Takes queen f4, takes, but this is the moment where it starts to go wrong. Well, it's actually managed to get a little bit of something here. Rook c7 is a possible threat. A couple of ideas that my engines played that were turned out fine for Black. Queen b4, hitting the queen and just chasing it back a little bit. And Stockfish played rook a7, just covering c7, which looks ugly but is actually pretty effective, you know. And well, Black can try and play maybe h5, g6, chase the knight away. It got a little bit sharp in the Stockfish game, but it worked out fine for Black in the end. Queen a6, rook b7, and queen takes d3. This was a key move, hitting the rook on c2, threatening queen e4 check, and this rook on the 7th rank is defending f7. Little bit fraught there, but that was still, you know, completely fine for Black. But Stoofvlees played queen b3, and the funny thing about this is that both you know, Leela and Stoofvlees both thought that the positions that we'll see were, you know, almost equal. Leela thought it was slightly better, and Stoofvlees thought it was equal. But Stockfish, which was kibitzing on the match, said this was completely winning for White. So yeah, quite amazing. I would have thought, to be honest, that you're going to see that that this was a position that the engines, that the NNs might have been able just to assess as very, very strong for White, very, very strong for White. But clearly, in this case, search trumps evaluation, because White played rook c7, and now there are some threats against the f7 pawn, and well, Stockfish's idea here was panic stations rather, and play d4 just to re-establish the communication between the queen and this pawn. And well, this pawn on d4 is hanging, so knight d4, queen d5 check. But in my engine game, Stockfish, well, the engines in general did manage just to save this position for Black. White's got, you know, this pawn on b2 is a big target, and well, if your extra pawn is just a d pawn, that's very hard to push through. I mean, rook and d pawn against rook, with 3 pawns on the king side, in principle is drawn. Even though I did see Michael Adams once win it against, I think against Laurent Fressinet in a wood green Guildford match all those years ago. But still, you know, I mean, in principle, that's going to be drawn. But Stoofvlees didn't see a problem and played queen takes d3. And now Leela brought out knight takes h6 check. Takes, and queen f7 check, and king h8. And this is quite a funny little position. Of course, it looks quite dangerous for Black. But, you know, when you take a little look at it, you might say, yeah, okay, but, you know, why would this be losing for me? I mean, White's only got this threat of playing queen h7, and my queen's perfectly placed. And, of course, you know, my queen's always able to give perpetual checks to the white king if it gets a little bit more exposed. And White's got no pass pawns on the queen side or anything like that. So, yeah, in general, you know, you could understand that it gets assessed as drawn. The one big problem that Black's
defending it, but none of Black's pieces can really move from where they are. Yeah,
that is the big problem. That's the big problem. The rook on a8 can't move off the back rank. The bishop can't move from f8 because of queen g7 mate, and the queen absolutely has to defend h7, of course. And yeah, I mean, what can Black do? I mean, a3 doesn't do anything. We just take it. If you play d4, that's all right, but what are you going to do next? If you play queen b1 and d3, then h7 is no longer covered, and queen h7 mate is possible. So actually, black is pretty much powerless and just has to wait. Here Stockfish, with its very deep search, just manages to find, sees straight away, from a very long way away, that this is just winning for white long run. But yeah, I would have thought somehow that, understanding how passive the opponent's pieces are, that the NNs could have evaluated it also very positively for white. As it is, it takes a little while for Leela first, and then afterwards for Stoofvlees to understand what it is. And the key thing is that white is going to put the pawn to f5 to block off that the protection of the black queen. The only important thing is to find a safe square for the king, and that square is going to be h5. That is going to be the square to put the king on. And actually there's pretty much nothing that black can do about this. So rook b8, rook a7, not particularly useful, but perfectly fine. f3, queen e2 check, king h3, queen f1, king g4, queen c4, king h5. There we are. King is, you're out of checks, and queen h7 is threatened. Queen c2 covering, rook c7. Yeah, Leela plays around a little bit, always enjoys playing with its food, they call it in the TCEC chat, which is quite appropriate. And now g4. So what does g4 do? g4 blocks the d1 h5 diagonal. So when this f pawn moves on to f5, there's no queen d1 check anymore. And as you can see, I mean, black is completely powerless. Again, white doesn't need to play these moves, I don't think, in particular. But centralizing the queen can never be bad. And now f4, and f5 is coming in, and the queen will no longer be able to defend h7. So queen a2 was played, queen f5, threatening queen h7 mate, bishop b4, desperate times, desperate measures, looking for a line like queen check, queen g8, and I don't know. Actually, isn't this just mate? Actually, queen f6, no, 6, and queen c6. This is just mate, actually. So I don't really know what black's particularly hoping for. Leela played the very simple queen f6, which is also very strong, threatening queen g7 mate. And after queen d5, f5, a couple of desperate moves ensued, and Leela was able to deliver mate on the board.
Checkmate.
Checkmate. So there we are. I hope you enjoyed that little summary of the English opening as seen by the best chess playing entities on the planet. I thought there was some very interesting ideas there. In particular, I do like this idea, bishop c5, all these very sharp lines, that have been played with this knight moving to h4, and the sacrifice of a piece like this. Really very, very interesting, and I mean, I think if you know these engine games, then you've definitely got a big step up on most of your opponents, because they certainly, a lot of people still don't know how amazing these engine games are and how cutting edge theory they can be. And then afterwards, this line of c6. Well, I mean, very interesting. I think Fabiano Caruana has obviously done a great job from the black side against the strongest human players to make this viable. But I think that that both Stockfish NNUE and Stoofvlees really found some very interesting ideas. In particular, this pawn sacrifice idea of Stoofvlees, just completely ignoring white's basically the crux of white idea, and just sacrificing the pawn for counterplay here. Well, knight d8 is fine too, but this really gives black some pretty decent winning chances, I think, as well. I thought this was a really impressive idea, and again, no human games like this. This is all just the engines just deepening theory, just by themselves. So there we are. I hope you can make use of that in your own games, and
Please do let us know if you can.
Absolutely, absolutely. That'd be really interesting. Yeah, and well, if you want to see more videos like this, then don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to see, well, if you want to see the, you know, some the games that started all this wonderful recent trend in computer engine chess, you know, with the neural nets taking on Stockfish, then do check
out Game Changer, the book.
Indeed.
Available in paper copies and also electronically.
Exactly. Yeah. No, Forward Chess, Chessable. They do some great digital editions of it. Yeah, and otherwise, you know, just keep well, keep safe, and thanks very much indeed for watching.
Thank you for watching.